I guess I will go first because I'm next to you, Nancy, and I'm in red. Um, my name is Perry Young. I'm one of the founding members of Slant. We got together in 1995. Presently, I am working on a television series, Warrior, for HBO Max, and I go back to Word Films in South Africa in late August for season 3.
Rick?
Hi, yes, I'm Rick Ebihara, and presently not doing too much performing, but just working at a restaurant, and also trying to maintain a house upstate and an apartment down in the city, and but finding time to perform songs and telling stories. So it's still happening, just infrequently.
Oh, I guess that pause means it's my turn. So I'm Wayland Quintero. So, yep, I'm one of the 3 guys of Slant here. And so the question is, what are we currently working on? Well, since I'm currently in Hawaii, I've been working on finishing 2 video projects, 2 video community projects for something called Philcom Cares, using my students and myself as performers to continue to tell people in the Filipino community here to get vaccinated, right? Because there's a lot of still resistance here for whatever people have their reasons. So that's one thing I'm doing. The other thing is I've been having conversations with another local actress who wanted to do a local version of Death of a Salesman. But then we got word from the publisher that we can't alter the text or anything or location. So we're not going to do Death of a Salesman, because since I also teach Introduction to Drama and Theater, in addition to Filipino Studies, I am in what you call decentering the Western canon when I teach. All right. So I told people here, if you guys want me to be involved in Death of a Salesman or anything like that, sorry, I'm not going to do it unless we get to change it for our needs. So in conversations to come up with maybe an original work. So kind of that's where my head is at these days, since I'm here, because I'm all for decentering the Western canon and wanting to do things that are maybe original, or at least if there's existing Asian American AAPI works out there, do that and live up to my word with my students. If I say you guys should really be looking at works about where you see yourself in it. So I introduce students to local plays, Hawaiian plays, Black American, Latinx, Asian American works. So I have an agenda.
I mean, I think you 3 have had an agenda for a long time. No?
True.
Yeah, so can we go back to 1995 and talk about how you all met and your first show?
We'll just go in the same order.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So 1995, before that, how we met was I first met Rick in 1992 in my second gig in New York City through Pan Asian Rep. We both got cast in Cambodia Agonistes, and it was a musical based on the Cambodian Holocaust, with some dark humor, written by Ernest Abuba, directed by Tisa Chang. We were the youngest members of the company at the time. Rick and I, we were like the babies. I think we were 26 or 27. And it was just like, for me, I felt like, oh, this isn't really my, cup of soup, right? I'm a performer. It's just not my taste anyway. And Rick started to say, yeah, I don't really, not to say anything really disparaging about the production. It was, it's a powerful piece. It just wasn't our cup of soup. And we thought, we went on tour a lot, and we thought, we should do something together. Rick and I, we should, we hung out together a lot, and we were both musicians, and we just like, let's just write some songs and see what happens. And so around that time, I also met Wayland, who's the shadowy figure you see now. um, through like the performance art dance scene of downtown. And he was doing some weird kooky stuff back then too. Um, and I thought this is a guy I could hang out with and make some stuff with, you know, because it wasn't, you know, I was decentering the Western canon at the time of theater, right? Without that language, in 1993, you know, when I met Wayland. So Wayland was facilitating. No, we met at La Mama. And it was in a production with when Wayland was a dancer with H.T. Chen, and Ellen Stewart got HT and director on the Asian Cultural Council grant named Freddie Mao from Hong Kong to collaborate on a production. HT brought Wayland into the production, and Ellen Stewart brought me into the production. And you know, the director and choreographer didn't get along, so they fought, and the production fell apart. But I thought Wayland and I, I knew that he'd be someone cool to hang out with and make shows, and it'd be fun. And that was sort of like right before Slant got together. So that's how I met these two guys.
I would actually love to hear a little bit about before, for each of you, before you met Rick, where you grew up and what you studied to become a performing artist.
Okay, just quickly. I mean, I was born in Oakland, California. I basically was a fine art major in college. And while I was in college, that's when studying fine arts, I also just happened into an Asian American history class. And I was like, oh my God, you know, I knew nothing about any of this, any of the laws that guided my life, you know, and I was like, it explained everything. And at the same time, I started seeing in the art world, like how there are all these systems in place for, in order for an artist to make it, you have to kind of fit into these systems. And I'm like, okay, you know, my Asian American studies just expose white supremacy. And here in the art world, it's all about white supremacy and how you fit into this art world, you know, and I wasn't going to make it in there. So I changed my, you know, I decided to minor in the Asian American studies. And about the same time, I wandered into a dance class because I wanted to push the art that I was doing into more out of the Western canon, which was performance art, because then the systems didn't exist yet. It was just being created. Performance art and life art was pretty new in the 80s. People hadn't done that stuff yet. You can't sell it. It wasn't a commercial. It did fit into the capitalistic system of art. So that was something that was really interesting to me. That was like a true voice and an arena that I could play in and not get feel like I had to under the context or canon or container of white supremacy. So I was also a punk rock musician. So like all that stuff was just about tearing down systems and making some raw art, you know, at the way you want to make it with and against the status quo. So that was my formal, I guess, or underground training to be an artist. It was like coming from a performance art, punk rock place that challenged the rules of society. And so basically that influenced everything I did. And then I saw a Fred Ho production called Not a Chinaman's Chance. And I went, wow, I want to do what that guy is doing. You know, this group was called the Afro-Asian Art Ensemble. And it was, you know, Black musicians, Asian musicians singing opera about, you know, the Chinese railroad and how Chinese were getting blown up if they didn't get pulled out of the tunnel in time. You know, it's not a Chinaman, it's about a Chinaman's, you don't have a Chinaman's chance. And I went, that guy is doing what I want to do. He's addressing white supremacy in art, and it was great. It was powerful art. It wasn't just lecturing or finger pointing. There was a lot of skill, craft, and heart involved. And I was like, that's what I want to do.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you know where you saw that and when?
It was San Francisco State University. I saw him do a concert at the Student Union with the Afro-Asian Art Ensemble, and they were handing out flyers for the opera of Not a Chinaman's Chance. In a mission, I can't remember the space. It was in the Mission District. It was a performance space. Rick, I think it was your cousin that ran that space in the Mission District, a dance performance space.
Oh, Kimi Okada.
Yeah, what was the space in the Mission?
Oh, it was the
It's a
Overland
performance
Dance,
space.
ODC.
ODC's dance company was in that
Yeah.
space, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, it was around 1985 when I saw that.
Wow. So
Overland
when-
Dance Collective. Yep, the Overland Dance Collective.
Consortium, I think.
Yeah, because I used to live in San Francisco too, so I kind of knew some of the dance folks. So, and I remember Kimi Okada's name with ODC. Anyway,
So Rick, before you met Perry, where did you grow up and how did you end up in New York City? And what had been your plan in your studies and what you wanted to be?
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest, like all over the Midwest. I was born in Pittsburgh, moved to Cleveland, then moved to Kokomo, Indiana, then moved to Davenport, Iowa. So it was all over the Midwest because my dad just got transferred around. And but throughout the Midwest, I mean, we were probably the only Asian family that I remember growing up, at least in school. And maybe there were like two others at least in Davenport, Iowa, anyway. We finally settled in Cleveland, Ohio, and I went to school for music in a small conservatory just outside of Cleveland, and fell into theater, fell into dance, fell into musical theater, so a lot of performance, and was performing for the Cleveland Opera, and decided to move to New York. Friend was moving there. She said, "Why don't you come?" And I go like, "Okay," because nothing was really holding me back in Cleveland. And so I moved to New York and tried to do the whole actor musical theater thing, auditioning, and that's how I met Perry in a Pan Asian production of Cambodia Agonistes. And from there we met, and we decided that together that this really wasn't what we really wanted to do. And we were talking about what would we do if we had the opportunity, and we gathered up on the attic space of La Mama where Perry was staying, and we used to write songs. I think we wrote My Girlfriend's a Yakuza there. It's just like we brought guitars and we were just sitting up there in the attic in the small space, on a futon, and just playing music. And that's kind of how our relationship started, and what we wanted to do, and how we wanted to tackle things that affected us, things that affected our identity, and things that how can we put our own stories into a performance type of what do you call it, medium. And that's kind of how it all started.
And then Perry, you met Wayland at La Mama.
Yeah, I mean, Wayland could tell that story, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
With HT and that production with Freddie Mao.
yeah, that was one place where we met, and I remember that whole event is coming back to me, and then suddenly we were canceled. The whole show was canceled because, like Perry said, the director and choreographer did not get along. So you got a choreographer originally from Shanghai and a director from Hong Kong. Things are not going to happen, right? So anyway, but prior to that, actually, Perry had mentioned earlier about the kooky stuff I did in a downtown scene. So Perry was involved in a piece that we all collaborated in creating at a place called University Settlement. It was a really kooky piece with choreography. I remember Perry going upside down on a handstand against the wall with a Greek American girl named Debbie Stamos. And then one of our collaborators on trombone, a white guy named Tim Ellis, who's doing comedy shticks on his Facebook feed. I mean, there's still people we still stay in touch with, and there are other people in the group, but we did this really kooky stuff, and At the end, I had everyone bark like dogs, and while the guy played his trombone, and all this fun stuff when you could actually have fun, right? So, and not worry about box office. So it's like that. And then Perry was super supportive. He would come to see me. This is all before Slant. Perry'd be in the audience. He'd come and see me in stuff like Mumia the Judgment, where I played African American characters, about the whole Mumia Abu Jamal trial and that whole faux pas of what the cops did to him. And Perry was in the audience for that, when I played a guy named Delbert Africa, fist in the air, making speech kind of stuff. And then he came to see me in the one and only performance of Short Eyes off Broadway when I was cast as Paco, a crazy Puerto Rican inmate. And that should have run, but the producers forgot to get the rights to the play. So the deceased playwright's brother was there and said, "You didn't get my permission. By the way, who's that Chino on stage playing Paco?" So like I had issues with casting too. And that's when I had long hair. I thought it looked maybe more Puerto Rican. But anyway, it's like, no, it didn't pass. And then so Perry came to those, and we just got to know, and then other meeting points. And I have to say, I think one of the people who also, in a way, in his own ways, brought us together was Corky Lee. So he was, in a way, invite us, and he would promote us individually for what we were doing. And then when we got together as Slant, so he, in a lot of ways, was already in our lives. And I know Perry can speak to that with, Havoc and Gold Mountain and all of that. So, I that's part of my pre-Slant into Slant history with these guys. And then I met Rick when we got together in that attic to create our first show, when we were debating what should we name ourselves and what should we call the show. And we had all kinds of options, like, Rimming the Pacific, or, Yellow this or Yellow that, or Slam the Banana, or I don't know what. It was like all kinds of crazy names.
Outhouse.
So like, yeah, all of this we threw out. And when I think we had the name right of our show before we even had all the material, right? So that's, we just know with the, okay, we'll call ourselves Slant. I remember Perry going, yes, I like how that slant rolls off the tongue, and it means a lot. And it goes slant. And then that's how we delivered our song, right? Our opening song. And then I have to say this, having grown up in Hawaii, where the Asian experience is different than on the mainland, I think that Slant, along with other folks like Peeling the Banana, right, kind of drew me in, embraced me into this Asian American consciousness in New York City. Because growing up in Hawaii, there's a hierarchy between different Asians here. And if you live here long enough, you know that. So I was raised by a lot of retired Filipino plantation laborers, because we had no relatives here. So when my parents brought me here, I was born in the Philippines, in the northern highlands of northern Luzon. When my parents brought me here, we had nobody here except my dad's employer, an apartment, and $100 a month salary that they gave him at the time. And we were struggling. But here were these old guys who helped raise me. So I bring a lot of that kind of, like, you say, historical DNA memory into everything I do. And I bring that into the whole Asian American kind of movement and consciousness, because we've all been fucking oppressed. So we share that as, identified others from Asia and the Pacific.
Wayland, can you talk a little bit about what your background was in terms of what you studied?
All right, so I came from a dance background. I was in the middle of finishing my political science bachelor's degree at the University of Hawaii. And then I got into a dance class. I said, wow, this is more fun. And, I loved using my body. I'd work out at the gym and all that stuff, but it's like, you don't go body surfing, but dance was a whole different thing. And I was the only guy. So that was kind of a big plus. So it was kind of fun. And one thing led to another. And I just said, I want to see what it's like on the mainland, and went to San Francisco for a couple of years, danced with a company called Candy Beal and Company, based out of Santa Cruz, but lived in the city, so I commute to Santa Cruz. Got to know the Bay Area a little bit, some of the dance scene there, and then decided, no, I want to move to New York, because New York's a place. So what happened before I moved to New York, I went to a dance workshop at the Nikolai Lewis Dance Foundation. I got to stand up here to activate the light again. So I went to the Nikolai Lewis Dance Studio, or used to be, somewhere, on Broadway. And I decided, I'm going to be back. I was sitting in Washington Square Park after one of the workshops. And I sat in Washington Square Park near Bob's Library. And I said, I'm going to be back here. And I did a couple of years later. And I moved to New York in 1989. So I continued my dance studying at NYU Tisch School of the Arts, graduated, all of that stuff. And then got with H.T. Chen and Company, HT Dancers, toured with them. We're in LA when Rodney King happened and all of that stuff. So that was really interesting. Or actually we're in San Francisco, but Rodney King was happening in LA simultaneously when we were touring there. So that was kind of another West Coast memory for me. And then Gus Solomon's and Company, I choreographed and did kooky stuff in New York City. Then I said, I want to get into theater. So I started taking acting classes, and then got connected with different off-Broadway productions. And then going back to what I said earlier, met Perry and then Rick. Yep.
So Corky being a common denominator, how did that happen? And was Corky, did he knew you separately, or he met you when you were already all together?
Well, I met him. Corky was my first friend in New York City. When I arrived, I was auditioning for things. I didn't get anything, but the first thing I got was Havoc in Gold Mountain. That production, Corky happened to be a writer as a collaborator. So he wrote a scene, which is like the only play that Corky ever wrote. And I was gonna, it was called "The Chinese Men Can't Make Me Laugh." And I was the Chinese man. So a lot of pressure on me to make people laugh, But Karen Lee was the other actor. So there was the two of us who did that play. And so we know that play, and we actually want to read it and put it up soon. So I met Corky. Corky was my first friend. And he just brought me around and showed me everyone. I was like, oh my God, this guy's plugged in. He knows everyone in the Asian American community. And it was like the perfect friend for me, because that's exactly who the people I wanted to connect with. And then when I connected with Pan Asian Rep and Rick, Corky had been a long time, a collaborator with Tisa Chang. So I think maybe that's when you met Corky, Rick?
Yes, actually, that was the first thing I met when I met Corky, was through Pan Asia. And he was great. He was just always there, he would Tisa would be yelling at him like, no, I need this, I need that. And I'd go like, who is this guy? But he would always be there. He would always be there. And he would just be so friendly and engaging. And he would ask you, where you from? And like, oh, do you know this person? Because you should meet him. And it was great. It was great. And then when we formed Slant, and then he was just always, it was great. It was great. He was our #1 fan and our 4th member. And he was just always there at every rehearsal, even when we were just starting to try to put things together, he was there. And he was documenting, and he was fantastic. He was absolutely fantastic.
So do you have Corky's photos of you from that time? You do?
We do. Yeah, contact sheets.
Wow.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about how do I make these available. There's an opening right now of
Yeah.
Corky's works. I
Yeah.
just couldn't, I think there was some talk about Karen and I putting up the play for it. We just couldn't get it together. But yeah, I have contact sheets, black and white contact sheets of all our early shows that, and even the last show that he took in color, when he went digital, right? He went from black and white pulling negatives to digital camera. And so I have like things on a CD, I guess, yeah.
Wow. So Perry, why were you living in the La Mama attic?
Well, I guess it was like a self-imposed homelessness, like after I had done that Pan Asian tour with Rick, going to Cairo in South Africa, I had to move out of my apartment in Chinatown because the head roommate was just getting a little too crazy, and I didn't have a place to stay. So I bumped into Shigeko Suga from La Mama, who I had worked with in a Ping Chong production in 1993. And I was telling Shigeko, I don't know what to do with my bags. I have to get out of my place. I'm going on tour. And she goes, well, why don't you just live at the residence at La Mama? I'm like, are there residents? Can I live there? And she brought me in to meet Ellen, who was in the middle of rehearsing this epic fight scene, with this Japanese choreographer. And, it's this big Japanese Italian production. And she just brings me to meet Ellen. Ellen is sitting there, and Shigeko says, Ellen, he needs a place to stay when he comes home from the tour. And Ellen just looks at me and go, well, give him the keys. And so when I came back, this attic had a bed, but it was part of the La Mama residence that housed touring artists who came to La Mama to perform. So it can sleep up to like 22 people at any given time all over the place. It wasn't legal, by fire codes, but I was sleeping next to like, sets and prop pieces and all this stuff. It was really like a Fellini film, at the time, cast of characters, and it was just so colorful. And so I had come back from the tour, and I went, my first day back, someone grabs me walking up the stairs and says, oh, you're back. Ellen's been looking for you. And I went, really? So they bring me to Ellen, and Ellen says, how's your sword fighting? And I went, it's okay. And she goes, okay, Ivana just broke her ankle and the New York Times are coming tonight, so I need a sword fighter. And next thing you know, they pulled me aside. They're teaching me the choreography of sword fighting and this whole piece. And suddenly I was on stage that night with the New York Times coming, and it was like this hour-long performance that I had just put into, wandering through. Okay, now it's the fight scene. I'm fighting and fighting. And, so Ellen just, she really enjoyed what I did. And it was like, she goes, basically, I said, okay, so after this run, I said, Ellen, I'll try to find a place as soon as I can to move out. And she goes, baby, there's no hurry. And that was just like a message from God, because I was like, if I can stay here and not work and actually do shows, this would be the most incredible grad school that I could ever have in theater and performance and experimental performance, and especially performances that decentered Western work, because it was all about touring companies from Europe and Asia and Africa and everywhere else that did work at La Mama. So for the next 3 years, I was basically homeless. I didn't work, and I just I worked a little bit, but just enough to like sustain myself. But I dove into all this theater work that just kind of like, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm able to do this. So I would say that I owe everything I do right now to that time period, because I saw so much incredible work, from Kazuo Ono to all kinds of African and Haitian voodoo work, that they put. And I was like, oh my God, this is performance. This is the most amazing work. We don't even have a language for how to describe these kinds of works, because they just don't fit into what we think of as theater. So that kind of work, I think, heavily influenced me in terms of like, hey, if I make something with these two guys, I want to make something crazy, something that's really not like what we think theater should be. But so that little attic was an incubator, I think, for me. I made props there. I wrote songs. I discovered the bamboo flute there. I met so many amazing artists from all over the world. You know, you drink their alcohol. You don't even speak their language, but, you know, they come with alcohol. Like, drink this, you know? And you just like, you're best friends with them and you learn about their culture. And yeah, so that's my experience of La Mama. I owe Ellen Stewart everything.
That's amazing. That's a great story. So when you moved in there, what year was that?
1993.
So Wayland, can you talk about your Slant's first show and how that came about?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Just let me touch upon my relationship with Corky
Yeah.
pre Slant. I knew Corky, and he knew me when I was with HT Chen and Dancers, and he knew me as, oh, the Filipino guy with HT Chen and Dancers. So, but he was Perry mentions firsts, and so in Philippine language there are terms for elder males as a form of respect, and in Ilocano the word is manong. In Tagalog it's kuya, but I use the word manong, and for me, Corky Lee was like my first Chinese American manong. I always tell this in my stories about him because he got it. I mean, he was Mr. Asia America, and he completely knew where I was coming from, and Filipino American history, you know, and anyway, he saw that I was dancing with HT Chen, and he started talking to me after this one performance, and we just hit it off. And after that, we would just go hang out and have coffee, you know, after my rehearsals at Mulberry Street, at 70 Mulberry Street, right? Hey, Wayland, when you're done with rehearsal, let's go out and get some coffee. Like, all right, cool, you know, just hang out. So, and that's the days I was, you know, not married, so everything was possible. So anyway, it was like, so that was great. But the first show, Slant, is that what you asked, Nancy?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You know, Perry, Rick, and I talked about doing something, as already mentioned here, that we wanted to do from our perspectives, and not having to feel like we have to fit into a formulaic kind of Western theater model, right? So we created basically we brought in what we wanted to try out. You know, we had no dramaturge, we had no devoted director or playwright. We had Genji Ito, though, help us with the music, especially the last piece of music he recorded for us, he made for us. But it was a process of, okay, I want to try out this scene, or I want to try out that song, you know, and we all work on it together. You know, we all bring different strengths and talents, which made it a really good combination, I think, because these two guys have a different musical background than I do. I have some musical background, but not to the extent these two guys. But I have rhythm, so at least I could keep rhythm, right? And I have a dance movement background, as does Perry. And then we all had some kind of acting / theater backgrounds. And we all wanted to have a common purpose of talking about, you know, these popular images of Asian American men. And that was the thesis basically of our show, was like, we're not the waiters on TV, not the model minority. And of course, as parody, no little dicks for you and me, because we're making fun of the whole dick size thing too. No little dicks for me, we're big dicks Asian men, right? So I mean, if you want to talk about individual songs and vignettes of scenes, we can do that for sure. But so many things here we could talk. A whole another couple of hours just devoted to this. But it was one of those shows we didn't know what was going to happen. We just wanted to do it, and that's all that really mattered. And Ellen Stewart, Perry, I think, went to ask Ellen if we could get some time to do a show, and she said, "Yeah, how's about these 2 weeks in December?"
Wow.
And then And Perry said to me and Rick, hey, you guys want to do this? It's like, yeah, let's go for it. I mean, we don't know what we're going to do, but we do know what we're going to do. We knew what we didn't want to do. That was for sure. Right. And the first floor theater, and that all happened. And, Asian Americans came out, and a lot of gay white men came out too, because they had expectations. Big dicks, Asian men, right? They wanted to see proof. Sorry, we kept our boxers on. But anyway, that was just an aside, but that was kind of the interesting thing of perceptions when you put a show out there with certain titles, like who's going to show up. But anyway, we overcame that, and later on, a lot of Asian Americans and non-Asians came to our shows, and it became like our signature piece over the years, and we toured with it to a lot of colleges, and we created what you call different kinds of shows, using a lot of material from Big Dick's Asian Men, as well as from other shows that we created. And so, what else do you want to know about the first show?
Well, maybe Rick, can you talk about what the reception was like of Big Dick's Asian Men? That there was this mixed audience that didn't know what to expect, but was there kind of a turning point where you picked up steam and the community was really supportive, and there was the desire for you to go to schools, and there was the need for schools to experience the work?
The show was incredible because we didn't know who was going to show up. We didn't know if anybody was going to show up at all, and it ended up by virtue of the title, and but people didn't know what to expect, and what people wanted to expect maybe were totally different. But it was great. The response was fantastic, and we sold out a lot, and I wasn't quite sure, because I think Rent was opening right across the street at around the same time. So it was kind of crazy. That whole block was crazy. And but we got a lot of good press from the Village Voice, and it was crazy, the response. And then we got calls from colleges. And now this was before we had the internet or even email. So it was I still don't know how people got in contact with us, but it was probably through La Mama. And a lot of these Asian student groups have never heard of anything like this before, and they wanted to bring us out. So we toured pretty heavily after the show, and they either called La Mama, or they made direct contact with Wayland, and we just started booking tours just on our own. And you went on tour with us.
I know.
So you were in the van. You were in the the van walking around.
Yeah. So was it because the Village Voice, you were getting press from the Village Voice? Were you getting press from other outlets also?
I'm not quite sure. We
Can I interrupt for a sec and just add, and you can come back to Rick?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that there was a really special moment for me, that when we were rehearsing and putting near the end of the show, there was quite a lot of friction between the three of us, because we didn't really know what this thing was, and we didn't have an outside eye. There wasn't a director, and there'd be like arguing because we didn't agree with how the scene should go, right? And I remember just a week before going into the theater, I remember you, Rick, going, people are going to come to this. I don't even know what this thing is. People are going to come, right? Like, this is crap. We made crap, like, because it wasn't right. I mean, that's from my experience, and I kept saying, it's great. This is great. We just had very different sensibilities, right, of what theater was. We're so different, and and but right into loading in, we started laughing on stage. We're setting the lights, and then suddenly we were laughing, like the piece really came together in the theater, right? And I remember we couldn't figure out the cigarettes. There was a scene where we didn't have the penises get cut off, and we didn't know what to do. And we just were standing there with the penises in the shadow thing, and it happened. That's really amazing part of the show only happened because we're in the theater. And Genji Ito said, well, I can go out and get a cigarette if you guys are going to take that long doing that, And we were like, oh my God, okay, how do we fix this? And then we thought, oh, look, what if somebody cut, all that happened, the chainsaw and the penises falling, all because of the shadow scene when we were in the theater. We didn't know that was going to happen.
Right.
And then when the show opened, it was sold out that first night. We were like, whoa, who's out there? The minute we played that raucous grunge song, we're not the way it is on TV. Boom, when the thing came up, we saw this whole audience of Asian American faces. I was like, oh my God, this is like home. They found us. We don't even know who these people are, but they found us. And then from that first moment on, the police sergeant's voice, can you say Gucci, Rolex, Obsession, check it out? People in the audience were cackling. And we were like, oh, I didn't know it was funny like that, right? Because we didn't have a director. We just thought, oh, that sergeant's just going to say this, and we're just going to stand there and go, oh, Gucci, Rolex. It was funny, So we learned so much. We learned so much from putting that first show up. And that first night, that whole 2 run was sold out. And that's why Ellen brought us back, So who came was the Village Voice, the New York Times, Downtown Express. They all wrote really positive, glowing reviews, and like Wayland said, the title is misleading in some new gay papers. Like, this is not a gay play. So, but, gay people came and seemed to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But sorry, Rick, so you can go on.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. But did La Mama do any PR or any outreach for you leading up to the show? Did they promote the show?
Yeah, they always
Mama
do.
has his own house. Yeah.
Yeah, they always do press releases. I mean, Jonathan Slaff was a publicist, so he's always putting out information on all the upcoming shows at La Mama. Going back to Corky, he helped, print up our first postcards back in the postcard days, at Expedi Printing. And then we'd be addressing them ourselves with the white stickers and all of that. And then mailing them out through La Mama to whatever little mailing list we had, plus La Mama's mailing list. And then handing out postcards or putting stacks of postcards in other spaces. It was real like guerrilla, pre-social media kind of way. I mean, I can't imagine what would have happened if we had social media that we have now back then, right?
Yeah, we were putting it on subway cars, just on subway seats, just putting them everywhere, hanging them out, just like anywhere we could.
Yeah.
Even in a restaurant, we were just like giving them to customers, like on their way out, on the way in. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Wayland, what is web TV?
That was one of those first services that was offered. All you had to do was have a television monitor, which I had a 13-inch black and white. Okay. And then they give you a little modem and a keyboard. It wasn't Bluetooth, of course. And you just set up an account, and that's how but these kids in college already had email, right? So I said, that was one of the first ways we started staying in touch with college campuses, like this guy, Joseph Cha, I think was his name, at University of Wisconsin, who brought us up, and we had to change the title to Big Fire Hoses, Asian Men.
Oh, that was Yugoslavia. This was Guy Lobcher.
But it was like, hang on, I gotta do this light thing again. But it's like, so yeah, that's what webtv.net was. And then that was our handle, Slant Performance Group at webtv.net. And and you couldn't save anything. Every email I wrote, I had to sit there and type the whole freaking thing all the time. There was no copy and paste, no template. Hey, yeah, hi, we'd love to perform, and this is our fee. We do what dates, Glenn and I talked to Perry and Rick about, it, and so it was like,
Wow.
yeah,
those first gigs came in because people read the New York Times, and they would call La Mama and say, "Is that group touring?" And then La Mama would call me, and I would ask these guys, "Could we tour?" And then we'd get their phone numbers. And this was before the internet, so they read the newspaper. And luckily these student groups read the newspaper. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten out there. We used to get fan mail, written hard copy fan mail at La Mama.
Yeah.
That we would read like letters from people. It was pretty wild.
the college campuses were actually a little bit ahead on the internet curve because, like we had organizations like ECASU, East Coast Asian American Students Union, who would get a hold of us. They found out about our shows somehow. And this is, I guess, so when was that election with Al Gore? 2000, right? But before that, he was propping up or pushing the whole internet World Wide Web thing nationally. And I think college campuses were already starting to implement some of that. And so groups like ECASU had these like groups, these listserv groups where they connected all the different campuses. And I think word started spreading that way too, with all these, like ECASU especially.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember how long we were on tour with you, but I mean that was such an amazing experience. And I mean this is very off topic, but I always remember something that Perry said about packing. And every time I pack, I hear Perry say this. Pack only what you need and then take out half. That literally every time me and Dash, I'm packing for me and Dash.
Wow.
I always hear you. And I just remember, so,
I hope it's good advice.
it's really good advice. But you know what? I always question you. So I put the half back in. And then when I'm away, I don't use any of that stuff. And I'm like, Perry was right all the time. So, the Perry, the point that you brought up about not having a director and that, that negotiation leading up to the show, you guys never had a director, right? Even after that.
We had eyes. We had eyes, and we asked people to look at our shows to get their feedback. I think the closest one would be Ron Nakahara, because he was a close friend, and he would get in there and really challenge us and stuff. But I also didn't agree with Ron on many things because we had different aesthetics. So I would welcome and value his opinion, but I knew that that's not what I wanted to do. But I really respect Ron's, expertise in what he does. And we had other directors come in and look at the work, especially Big Dick Asian Men, because it's dealt with stereotypes and penis sizes and black men and Asian men. And we had black eyes. Wayland invited a black director in to see how they would see it and what they would comment on, and so that we didn't want to offend anyone that didn't, that wasn't historically offended.
And Ellen would come in like all the time, and man, she used to give us a lot of help. Yeah, she used to give us a lot of help for a lot of things. It's just like too many words, and just like, and she would, everybody would give us opinions, and for the most part, we took a lot of them to heart. They went to a lot into the show. They helped us out a lot.
So the show was up for 2 weeks, and then did it get extended?
It ran again in 96
Okay.
in the club.
Yeah, there was an opening, and so 2 weeks later or something, Ellen said, "Come back. There's a space in the club." And then that's when the Village Voice heard about it. And well, they had done a review. Laurie Stone had written a really great review about us. And then when we put it up the second time, they sent a photographer and put us on the cover of the Voice Choices. And that was the famous cover that a lot of people said, oh my God, I can't believe, you guys, basically are props hanging out, and I don't know if that one did as well in terms of selling out. I think it did really well. And then Tisa Chang from Pan Asian Rep picked it up shortly after. So Tisa presented the show. So it had some good legs on. It was basically off Broadway. When I had some friends visit and they saw the marquee at tickets and they saw Slant, and they were like, whoa, we made it on the tickets booth, off Broadway. So that was a shocker. Performing on 42nd Street, right off, or 46th Street at St. Clement's Church. But it was shortly right after that, I think we started touring. So right when we opened the show, we did basically 3 runs in New York City, and then we started touring.
And how long did you tour for?
It was sporadic at first, right? But until it really picked up, I think, because then we made, the Second Coming, Squeal Like a Pig, and had to figure out an easier show to tour, because a lot of students couldn't tour, didn't understand how to book a theater group, they had to book a year in advance, get a technical director to talk to us. So we tried to make it easy, and we used like a musician's model, like Fred Ho. You can just come into any space and play and then leave right away. So we made a show at Kaleidoscope, which is a collection from songs from BDAM, Second Coming, and Squeal Like a Pig. So there were songs from those 3 shows that we called the Kaleidoscope Informal Slant Unplugged. We can perform it anywhere. Just book us, And so we got really busy then. I think a year or 2 later, especially in May, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We got really busy those months, and we could actually live off pay our rent that month.
And how many shows are there for Slant?
All right, so there's Big Dick's Asian Men, The Second Coming, Squeal Like a Pig, Archipelago, High, Wazoo. Did I miss anything?
We had a playwrights development grant at the Public Theater, and so we developed a play called The Rice Cooker Chronicles.
Yeah.
So I think, is that 8?
Yeah, but that's about 7. If you count Kaleidoscope, that's about 8. But interesting, the Rice Cooker Chronicles was right after George Wolfe took over Joanna Akalaitis at the Public Theater. But Joanna Akalaitis had this Asian American playwrights group going there, but after George Wolfe came in, that was disbanded, right? So I don't know history. So I think we came in and maybe George thought something could be done with us, or what's his name? Antonio, who's his last name. He was in playwright development at Public Theater, Philam guy. Merv Antonio. He helped bring us in.
Yeah.
But didn't go any further than one reading at the Public Theater. I think when the suggestion was, can you guys take it on the road and try it out there and then come back? Like, okay, so.
This was also one of those moments where I felt like we would be doing something that wasn't my taste again. We would fit into the system of what theater is, that was going to be geared towards off Broadway or Broadway. Then we're going to fit into this big capitalistic system of making work that's accessible and selling tickets. And it was like, okay, now I'm wrestling with that personally,
So over the years, how did the 3 of you figure out how to work together and produce the shows together? How did it evolve from Big Dick's Asian Men?
I think a lot was spurred oftentimes I think that what was going on around us. So for example, we wanted to do kind of like, quote, a non-historical but historically kind of embodied piece with the Second Coming. We had the railroad piece in there. We had references to the internment camp. So we had those kinds of histories in the Second Coming. So to kind of depend where we were at in our headspace and what was going on around us, the show High was kind of a response to, Giuliani's treatment of people in the streets. When Abner Louima was, violated by the cops at that time and in the 90s, and we I don't know, we felt like we needed to respond, I think in our own group's way to that. So Perry was a street musician, always on the run. Rick was the homeless guy who had all these bottles, and that was his playmates kind of a thing. And I was a cop. I represented the authority, right? So this was a play that was completely, I think, in response to what was going on around us and the whole persecution of street artists, homeless people, and any other marginalized groups. And so I guess what I'm saying overall is we thematically, even though our work was created in a vignette, scene, music, monologue, puppetry style also, we had the garage band feel all the time going through, but the themes came out of what we wanted to say. So the Squeal Like a Pig was about what would, like, 3 aliens from another constellation landing on Earth, how would they try to assimilate or fit in to American society? So we kind of followed a path of each of us as aliens in our silver suits and white faces, starting off with this opening song on a spaceship that was kind of rickety, and and then you see the trajectory of each character as they go along, and somehow they all meet up. And do they get along or not? As assimilated aliens, parentheses, Asians, so there's a accent elimination scene in that. There's all this, the dominatrix scene. There's the, all this, all this fun stuff.
It's all a part
I
of
think-
assimilation.
Yeah, I think if you were also asking about our process and how we evolved or maintained the process from the beginning, or how did the process change, is that right?
Yeah.
I think one of our first philosophies was to ask ourselves if we were having fun, right? Because Rick and I said, if we make a show, because Rick and I were sitting around hotels in Texas or whatever, while we were on the road with Cambodia Agnestes. And again, I don't want to say anything disparaging about it. It just wasn't our cup of tea. And we're like, we got to have fun when we make a show. It's got to be fun, right? So we asked ourselves that a lot during making the first show. Is this fun? I'm having a lot of fun, and the things I like to do, and are we? And then when we're all 3 of us are laughing, we know it's funny and it's working, because we're very different people with different aesthetics. And when that first show was a hit, we were like, oh wow, we just gave birth to this amazing kid, but we didn't really know who really took control of this, but this kid came out of it. So let's see if we could do it again. And I think while we're doing that, we started to be a little more aware of our audience, which we wasn't before. So like I said, when we were on tour, a lot of people were asking, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know about that. We're like, let's make the show about history so we could address these things. But I think we still asked if we were having fun, right? So we still, for me, because I came from punk rock and all that in California, I wanted to play guitar. I wanted the show to have this energy, right? So it's not just people falling asleep at the theater. So that was one thing I think that we always tried to ask. Correct me if I'm wrong. And even we challenged ourselves conceptually about the piece, because by the time we did Squeal Like a Pig, it was different, very different from the first 2 pieces, because we didn't use any English. It was us in these white faces, skull caps, silver suits, and we were aliens that landed on Earth. And what happens with these aliens when they assimilate into Earth culture? And then we follow them. So that was a very different thing. And I think we had a lot of fun, and that's one of my favorite shows. So, I mean, the only time you heard English was when they sang. Other than that, it was mime or grunting or making some made up language. So that was a really cool conceptual thing. But I think by the time, for me, I think when we started to do Wazoo, also we traveled in China. We started to get, it started to become work at the same time. We were like, oh, it's not just fun, we have to work, and we have to have a kind of work aesthetic, and what are we creating and making, and unfortunately that does happen too. So is it going to be good? What is good? So those things we're, I think, challenged with. But I think still till the end, I always tried to say, are we having fun with this? And while we're having fun, it's also got to resonate with our culture, with what we want to say about our culture, to give it a voice, because it needs a voice, a certain kind of voice, I think.
And if it wasn't for La Mama and Ellen Stewart, these shows probably would not have existed. So, I mean, if it wasn't for her saying, like, you have 2 weeks every year, she would go like, okay, these are your 2 weeks. We would come up, we would have to come up with a show, and we would, and it would challenge us in a good way, a very good way. And yeah, I love those. I love those shows. Those are great.
Yeah.
By then we were also all working jobs, we paying rent, all of that stuff. So we had to balance, as most artists in New York have to do, is balance having this income coming in while you're trying to do your art, right? So there's all this, happening.
Are you three still creating work together?
Well, we had I think Wayland moved to Hawaii,
Yeah.
right, many years ago. So we weren't making any work after Archipelago, and I think that was made in 2000. And what was it, 2007 or 8? Am I wrong, or earlier?
I'm not sure exact year, but yeah, I returned to Hawaii in 2007 because my father was dying.
Right. So we must have made it right before then. And I think we knew that was our last show as a threesome, right, as a trio. And yeah, we got a great review in the New York Times. But it was actually, we were tired by then. I think we rehashed some things, right? If I'm correct.
Oh, I just remembered another show at Mulberry Street. Sorry, Perry.
Oh, iHotel.
Yeah, Hotel California.
Hotel California. That's one of my favorites.
Right. It was about the iHotel failure.
The Filipino International Hotel eviction in San Francisco.
So yeah, there's like 7 shows. We count the Kaleidoscope show. That's like 8. So yeah, that was a fun show too, because that, it talked about that and these 3 guys who were tenants at the old High Hotel, and that was a lot of fun too. So the last time the 3 of us performed together was actually last July and then last October, doing Slant songs. And prior to that, early last year, after Corky passed away, we recorded the song that Rick wrote, that we all sang together virtually, right, in honor of Corky. Like, because Corky passed away in January 2021, and we all, from where we were, recorded ourselves singing along. So that was last year, in terms of doing something together.
We had a Slant reunion because of the anti-Asian violence that was happening, and this organization in Chinatown called the Chinese Organization for Media Awareness, COMA, like wake up from your coma, was being formed, and they asked me to join the board. And I thought, and Wayland said he was visiting at that time, and I thought this would be a good moment for the 3 of us to actually raise funds for COMA because of the anti-Asian violence, and address that and at the same time. So that was the first time we had gotten together and played together since 2007, I think, right? Yeah. And then
we had one more show on the road in 2008.
Okay, we did a tour. Yeah, a
Yeah,
small one. Yeah.
there was this one thing and, yeah. But after that, yeah.
And then Rick and I went off to do like stuff with La Mama under the family play date, because by that time I had my firstborn and kids were coming, and I just hated the theater that was offered to families. Families had to sit through this pinkalicious stuff. I mean, what the, like, I was like, what is this? This is horrible, and like you could see the parents just going, oh my God. And the kids are like, I don't really get this either, So I was like, we gotta do something engaging like La Mama would do for everyone. That's Ellen's thing. This has got to work for everyone. So, I said, Rick, do you want to do like all age, all audience, all ages theater, with me?
Mm.
And so I had fun. It was like
Oh,
I
yeah.
would put my kids in the show. And so we did it for like 5 years until they were like, okay, Dad, we had enough. Like I would put them in the shows and they would do things because we would engage the audience and have like, this is an all ages show. And it was very much in the style of La Mama, using the space, using the audience, and making everybody in the theater part of the show.
Wow.
And I think we got a lot of really great response. And I helped La Mama build that program, La Mama Playdate. And Rick and I dropped out. But they're still going on with other artists, and it's a hit, La Mama Playdate.
Wow.
Yeah.
When did you and Rick, when did you leave? When did you stop doing that?
Maybe 2 years ago. Was
Oh,
that
wow.
right? Yeah, so we did it for a long time.
Wow, how did I not go to that?
I don't know.
How long-
Uh,
That's
we
so sad.
we employed, because I got it was just Rick and I emceeing a curated performers. So, and it was mostly AAPI performers who did dance and music, so that it would
That's crazy.
yeah, and it
I
was
would
always
love that.
engaging. Oh yeah, it was great, and it's still going on now. It grew, even the La Mama Playdate. It
Yeah.
grew into workshops with kids,
But
aside from just the performance.
But it's still AAPI performers?
Not as much because other people are curating it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I specifically made it that because it's Slant, right? And
Yeah.
we need to bring our voice downtown. So
Right.
Yeah,
we had taiko drummers, hula dancers. I mean, all kinds of, every year we had a different lineup roster.
yeah,
And then we used my kids' friends who were in like the band. They would bring the orchestra instruments, and they would, it was Maura would perform, and she would bring her dance company, and it was real. I think it was really fun.
Yeah.
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 So we're almost at 2 hours.
Ooh, time
So
flies.
I feel like we
Oh,
just
it's still going.
started,
It does,
so
right?
that's weird.
It does, right?
But so Mike and I came into all of this like in 1997,
It might
Is that
have,
when you went on tour with us?
Well,
97?
98.
it must have been 99, because no, you know what? It was 2000 or right before, because we're shooting High. High was made in 99, and we were going
Yeah.
to make a documentary about High. But
Yeah.
Mike said, let's do it on BDAM because that's your signature show. And it would be, and so a tour evolved from just that, making calls. And we, as went from New York to Texas to wherever else, into LA, Henry David Wong Theater, and back. And we have all that on tape waiting to be edited.
Is it still where is it? Where
Well,
is
we have a rough cut. We
Oh,
have
you
several.
do?
We have several rough cuts.
Okay.
Being the experimental artist I am, it's not what I want it to be. Again, it was something like a mainstream documentary. Who are these guys in the view? People talk about them, they show them on the road. I want to see who the artists are and their process. I want the camera to be like a fly on the wall while they're rehearsing.
Yeah.
Because that's really right. So I want to recut all that, and it's just about time to make
Yeah.
it really special. There's some
Yeah.
really special footage, and it's just like letting the audience see us work, as
Yeah,
opposed to us talking about it and touring. And I mean, all that's fun too. All that is going to be part of it. But yeah, it's just finding the right editor
yeah,
that's on the same page,
yeah.
to know how to look for those moments and stream it all together.
Are
I
you
feel
still-
like you started quiet before, like with us, because you would go out and interview like all of the audience members, and you would go. You had some great questions. You had some great questions to a lot of these students in Texas, and that would those are still great. Those are still great. Like, what does it mean? Does big dick? Does penis size really matter? Does it like? And you'd have these women, these college students, give answers. It was really great, really great. They trusted
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, people like telling me stuff. I don't know why. Um, But Rick, I totally forgot that I did that until you just said that. Totally forgot. How long were we on the road with you?
I don't
you
know. It was a while. It was
I
a
would
while.
say like on and off because we would come back to New York City. I would say it was over 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many schools did we go to?
Well,
Well, there was Nashville. There was also Texas. There was Austin, University of Texas.
Tennessee was also Tom Lee, right?
Tom
Right.
Lee.
Nashville, Tennessee, right?
But yeah, Austin definitely. LA, were you guys there, Nancy?
I don't
Yes.
think we were.
You were in
Yes, we
LA. You were in LA.
At the
Yeah.
It's Los Angeles Community College, maybe? Or no, it was
No,
wasn't
it's
the
the
David
David
Henry
Henry
Wong.
Wong.
It was David Henry Wong
Yeah.
Theater, East West
Yeah.
Players.
Wow.
And it was sold out, right? It was like one event, one night, boom.
Right.
The curtains come up on us after the song, and it's this raucous full house.
Yeah.
Were you there with us in San Francisco at Theater Artaud? Or that was another, maybe not. Okay.
It's like you're talking to a different person. Maybe I mean,
I'm just
yeah.
I'm just doing the shotgun, seeing which ones you might have been.
I mean, y'all know like that part of my life, it really is like a totally different, I barely remember anything from that time.
Welcome to the
Mike-
club.
Mike,
No, it's like-
Mike just put a camera in my hands and would, berate
post-traumatic
me a lot.
stress. I know. It's like try to forget all of that.
But what I do remember is how different the three of you are and were. And that was so many years ago. So back then, maybe you were even more different back then
I
because
think we were.
you didn't have the years that you've had now. And it was always so, I think, I'm not going to speak for him, I'm Mike, but it was always so like curious how different you all were. Even just like in traveling, how you dealt with travel and what you were like on downtime and how you communicated. And even having that look, that perspective behind the scenes. I'm still, I don't know what your process is. It is like this, alchemy of three very different personalities making one thing. And
That's exactly what I want to capture on the documentary, what you're saying, because I don't understand it either.
yeah,
Like, when we're in the room, we're processing, and I'm like, oh my God, it's like just communication issues, right?
yeah,
You're not hearing what I'm saying, and like, we're speaking different languages, and yet we're working on this thing that requires a kind of alchemy because you can't verbalize, you can't use words to describe the thing we're doing, because it comes from like this magic, right? And to try to use words to make magic is very difficult. And we oftentimes couldn't find the language to communicate to each other. So I want to see that, because I know that's a process. I know that that's what you're saying has happened many times. It's like, I don't know how we got there because we just kept wrestling and pushing and feeling, it's a really
Yeah.
interesting thing. Yeah.
So how do the three of you feel about each other like today, like now? I mean, how is your relationship evolved? Like, is it, I mean, is it,
It's like talking to these guys like I did like back when. So we're older versions of ourselves, but I don't know. And it's just,
Well, it's really funny. We had that question right after we did the reunion, and it really kind of was like, oh, he's singing a little flat again. While we're just, it's like the same stuff. It was like coming back, but it was easier, and it was much easier and funny even. It's like, oh wait, we're doing that again. I see. I forgot about that. Oh, okay, I see. You know what I mean? It's like a married couple who split apart and come back and say, oh, okay, we're cooler now, but you're still doing that, huh?
Harry, I don't know what you're talking about.
So,
Yeah,
but it was easier, and there's a shorthand, but we got the show up. We got this amazing audience. It was really it was really heartfelt and moving for me to be with these guys again, and then to hear the songs again, and to feel the vibration of the harmonies. It's like, oh wow, these are my brothers, you know. And I haven't heard that in a long time, so aside from all that, the other stuff is little tiny stuff, the special magic came back right away, which was quite amazing.
And I think that's why every now and then I'll still get messages from people like, hey, when are you guys going to do another show? Or when are you guys going to do this or that? And we're like, I always say, well, stay tuned, because you never know, right? But I never say never, and I never promise that things will happen, and it's kind of, maybe that's the nature of us, is like when the opportunity comes up, it will. I'm going to be in New York again this summer. So if something can happen again, maybe we will, maybe we won't, maybe we'll just go get dinner and beer. I don't know. Maybe Quiet Before wants to have us do a show. I don't know. So,
If there's an event and people invite us, we always try to make it,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Which I just realized, I forgot to tell you guys. So Rob Gee at Pell Street said, I told him, we stay in touch. He goes, oh, wait, are you gonna be in New York? I said, yeah. He goes, well, do you guys want to do something again here? I said, possibly. You just got to let us know what the thing is, So, so I don't know if Rob's going to contact you, Perry, or whatever, but unless you're going to be in South Africa. I don't know when you're going to South Africa, but
Yeah, if we can do something with the dates that's available, we should, right? And
although I
especially we
don't-
should
yeah,
make it a community thing that we always do, and make sure that it reaches the right people, and there's a statement again. And we usually, like we like to do events that involve the community, because that's what, like, that gave us the work that made us who we are, our community. So it's always giving back, like the last coma thing that we did. It was like the monies was donated so that coma can fundraise more. And it's anti-Asian violence is not over right now. That's at the top of my
oh
list.
yeah. So on June 25th, there's a big unity rally in DC. I don't know if you guys are thinking of going to that. I'd love to go to that, just because I feel like I need to connect with that kind of a thing. Here in Hawaii, it's just so muted. People here, like, you go anti-Asian, and I'm like, you guys know what's going on? Like, yeah, we know what's going on. So how do you feel about it? Well, we got our own problems here. I'm like, yeah, but it's like kind of a muted response here, except, not everyone, but it's just a different feel. So, and I saw this June 25th thing at the National Mall coming up. I said, like, well, maybe that's something I and Desiree and our kid would like to go to, especially my 4-year-old. I want to get him exposed to movements. I know this is a one-off unity rally, but still it's part of a whole bigger thing going on right now that needs to be done and said. So
yeah.
It's certainly a bigger thing going on. So yeah.
Especially now, it's crazy what's happening. I guess it's always there's always going to be something happening. It's sadly, and then
yeah, in the 90s, we were dealing with stuff, but now it's a whole different fucking beast. that is being wrestled with. You know, that beast came out of its fucking cave after like over a century worth of oppression and suppression and lynching and interning and persecution and, you know, missing erasure from the history books and all that stuff. And so now this beast has come out like we're gonna fucking take you down, you know? So wherever we are, that's like, so, you know, when I teach at my community college, I bring that into like everything I do. And so does Desiree, my wife. Like, you know, you students got to get out there and you guys got to do shit too, you know? And so I don't know. You know, I sometimes get to perform and have to create my own stuff while I'm living here out in Hawaii, but you know, I use a classroom to perform too. So I do stuff, you know, in front of them and say, you know, you guys, I showed them slant footage. I showed them footage from Philam films and other Asian American films. I showed them footage from Disoriented. Remember Francisco Ali Wallace's film? You know, the debut. I mean, all this stuff. I said, you know, you guys got to connect in different levels. Turn them on to Joe Coy. Turn them on to, you know, all kinds of folks. And you guys watch the latest Disney thing? You know, that at least, you know, I know it's mainstreamy, but, you know, at least there's a representation going on there. So, yeah, anyway.
Well, Slant came out of a need to address like a racial disparity, right? About stereotypes and how Asian men were emasculated. And that was the thing that tied the three of us together. That when we said, you know, what would our show be about? If this was our only show, what would we say? Like, you know, we didn't think we weren't starting a theater group to go on. We were just three guys getting together to make a show. And if this was our only show, what would it be about? And it just came down to that little dick stereotype, the thing that oppressed us and shaped our lives in America. It's like, that's the thing we have to address, right? And then Wayland was just going, big dicks, Asian men, big dicks, Asian men. That kind of has a ring to it for some weird reason, right? And so we made the show. That was the title of the show before we even knew what we were making. And so that energy, I think, has always been with Slant and the name Slant, right? Because it's like we're addressing the language of the oppressor with that word. You know, it's always why did you guys choose Slant? It's like, because that's the thing that the three of us have in common. We are oppressed, the three of us, by that word. No matter where we go, whatever, you know, a Philam, you know, fifth generation Japanese American, first and fourth generation Chinese American, we didn't really have anything in common, really, you know, the way that, like you say, we're so different, but the thing that binds us was that stereotype, was that racist stereotype and the language from the oppressor. So that's the thing that we've always start from in terms of, you know, making the work. And, you know, it seemed natural. And you could just hear Wayland talking right now, you know, teaching about colonialism and the things that we do naturally is we still got to hammer this thing on the head. Right now, when Asian hate is rearing its ugly head, who's going to hammer it down? You know, us, cultural makers are going to hammer it down. Politicians, teachers are going to hammer it down. Our families and friends, our community, we have to galvanize them, you know, with enough inspiration to say, hey, our ancestors had it worse. We can knock it down. It's not as bad as they had it. So let's just hammer this thing down. So, I mean, I would always say that, yes, Slant has had an agenda, you know, and I do miss the three of us sitting around powwowing for the next show, because like Wayland said earlier, what's the agenda this month? It's Giuliani, you know? It's cultural appropriation, you know, like those are the things that we need to address because no one else is going to address that.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
you should figure out how to do that with Wayland in Hawaii. I mean,
Yes, you should.
maybe it's a different.
Absolutely. How do we do it? Absolutely. Online, you know?
Yeah, it can't be live right now, so it should be something different. And maybe, you know, the footage that you have from the documentary, maybe
Hmm.
that is that's a starting point for creating something that can live online and uh, get your agenda out there.
Absolutely. That's a great idea.
Yeah. And with each of us where we are right now, I don't know, commenting or performing around it too. I mean, yeah, so yeah, thank you, Nancy. Yeah, with this internet virtual world, like so many things are possible. It's never a replacement though for, when we work together, like when we were at 21 Pell Street, that was such a familiar and uplifting vibe between the three of us that the audience picked up. And that's why they showed up too. They picked up and that they commented on it afterwards again, you know. So I don't know, some who knows. Anyway, Desiree and I and our kid are gonna be there for a month, and maybe we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll have discussions while I'm there, and
Yes, we will definitely have discussions while you're here.
maybe
Definitely, definitely.
maybe we gotta do virtual puppetry. I mean, I don't know what.
Well,
You
Nancy,
gotta talk
thank
to
you.
Perry, man. He's Mr. TV. He's here and there doing, doing the gigs, man. So
Grabbing when we can.
Well, thank you for doing this.
Thank
Oh, thank you,
you.
Nancy. Thank you. And thank you for inspiring me. I love your inspiration. We may do something. We may do
Yeah.
something.
I think I think it's unlikely that you won't do something. So it's so nice to talk to you. I've missed you guys. And it's
Oh,
so good to, it's funny to like remember different things. And I'm glad that you all are still, together in this way and still able to collaborate, even if you're not together physically. So
Right.
thank you. And you always have my support, however I can support you.
thank
Well,
you.
thank you. Thank you.
I love it's so appropriate. Quiet before fill in the blank. So
Wayland, you are one of the few people that actually got that's, when we were talking about it, I was thinking about Quiet Before the Storm, but Ken was saying that he's thought of it as quiet before somebody speaks. But the vast majority of people think it means that we were quiet before. And that is not at all how I see it or feel it or hear it. So thank you for interpreting it that way.
no, I mean, I think it's leaving it open, which is a really beautiful thing. You don't have to tell everyone everything, right? It's like, yeah. That's why when you first sent me the images to download, I'm like, oh, that's really cool, interesting. Quiet before. All right.
I'll take a hit of that.
Yeah.
Well, it's legal now, it's legal.